there's a frightening 4 days to go now. There's a frightening feeling. Let's see if Daryl Burgess can calm us all down a bit. Daryl, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Adrian. You good?
I'm glad to hear it. And let's say hello to Jason as well, who joins us again from Miami. You all right, mate?
Very good. Hi, Adrian. Thank you very much for having us on. Daryl, thank you for being part of it. Thank you to everybody for logging in.
And is that the same shirt you were wearing last week, mate?
Well, I've got 3 or 4 that look exactly the same. So I just thought, or it's the same one. You wouldn't know the difference, right?
Yeah.
Right, where should we start? So, Daryl, I was just looking at you came to the Albion in '89 and left in 2000. Those were difficult years as fans, and they were must have been difficult years as a player as well. I mean, that was, it was a key time for us. Who spotted you in the first place? What took you to the Albion in the first place?
I actually joined in '87 as an apprentice. I signed pro in '89. So I came to West Brom. I used to be at the schoolboy. I mean, it's a bit different now to the way it was then. Obviously now you have academies, as Jason will know well of. When we were younger, it was kind of you were scouted, and then you went training, and then eventually they would sign you on what was called schoolboy forms. I was at Birmingham, I was at Villa, and then I went to West Brom at the same time, and then Norman Bodell moved from from Birmingham to West Brom as chief scout, and as soon as he moved to West Brom, he signed me on schoolboy forms, and then I signed apprenticeship forms, and it was a YTS then at 16. Then signed pro at 18.
And was there a moment, Daryl, when you were spotted, so to speak? You dream about this when you're a kid, that you're playing some schoolboy game or playing in a park, and some fella in an overcoat and a hat and a notebook goes, must be to your dad, Sonny, and you're playing for United or something, or the Albion. So what was that moment for you?
Well, for the West Brom one, I was playing for Solihull Schools, and in the English Schools Gillette Trophy, which was, I played for Solihull. It was a small borough, and it was the whole of England that were involved in it. And we actually got to the semi-final, and in around about the quarter-final, we played Chesterfield, and you always played on the ground. So when we played at home, we played at St Andrews. We played Chesterfield at their ground. And I played in that one, and I remember, this will surprise Jason, but I had a shot from about 35 yards, and it hit the bar and went out the ground. And right, horribly, it surprised you. I know it does. Yeah. I used to tackle from that far, but I didn't used to shoot from that far, Jason. And Roy Horrobin was there at the time, and he was waiting outside. At that time, I trained with Birmingham and the Villa, as I said before, as well. And Roy asked me to go to Spring Road, as it was then, to go and train. And I went down there. And then it was only about a month or two after that Norman left Birmingham and went to West Brom, and that's when he actually saw me as a schoolboy. But before that, I was just training. But yeah, it was that time when, as you said, they're waiting outside the ground, and then they say, "Listen, is there any chance? Are you free to come down on Thursday?" And to Spring Road, and is your dad there, etc. And that was my first kind of meeting with anyone from West Brom.
Jason, was it a similar process with you? I suppose you had an advantage, or perhaps it was a disadvantage, having your uncle and your dad in the game as well. So how did it work with you? Did you have to wait to get spotted, or what?
Well, it was relatively quickly for me. I started playing organised football at under-11s, and believe it or not, I was always the shortest in the team, and I was a little left winger cutting in on my right foot. And I used to play for a team called Parkfield, which is in Middlesex, somewhere away from my home. So we used to travel up there, and after a year, I got spotted by Spurs, and I went up to Tottenham. I was for 6 months, and I remember the first time I went there, I went down, I had my boots, and my mum had taken me. It took us an hour and a half to get there, so I'm already thinking, I'm not sure this is going to be the way that that I'm going to be able to continue with this because of the cost and because of the travel time. But we got there on the first day, and I just come straight from school. So I had my kit on and I had my school shoes, and we got there and they were training on AstroTurf, and I only had 6 studs. So I remember training in my shoes, which probably didn't give them too much of a good experience, hence why I didn't stay too long. But actually, Spurs was my first experience of professional football. And I remember getting a call. I called my Uncle Cyril and I said, "Spurs have been on the phone. I've made it. And he was like, "Yeah, it doesn't work that way, son. You got a long way."
Yeah.
So after 6 months with Spurs, I wasn't playing at a professional club, still playing Sunday football. And then I went across to Watford and I spent 2 or 3 years there. I really enjoyed that. But the real big one was for me going into the YTS years. Daryl will know, as a kid, all you were thinking about was getting a YTS. And going into leaving school, I was at Chelsea under Glenn Hoddle at the time. And I was playing left wing back, again, still the smallest in the team. And I remember the day when it was the time to understand if you were going to get cut or not, if you're going to get offered a contract. And they told me that I didn't make the cut, but I was welcome to come and train because I was just on that borderline. I didn't know if I was good enough yet. And that was such a difficult period because you feel like, and Daryl will know, you feel like your world's come crashing down, that it's not going to happen for you, that you'll never become a professional footballer. And I gave up football on the back of that. I didn't play for a year and a half. I was so devastated by it. It's such a difficult situation because you walk into the room, you've got this long line of all the players, you go in, some leave smiling, some leave crying, and you really think that that's the end of your football career in that moment.
And have you had a kick in the nuts like that, Daryl, on the way up?
Not so much like that with Jason. I mean, I was fortunate enough that obviously I signed as a schoolboy at 15, and then I was offered the YTS forms at 16. So that's all you're aiming for in that. You just want to become a footballer. So I was in the YTS. Don't get me wrong, the YTS, it's very different to the way it is now. But it was an absolutely fantastic time. It was the camaraderie, and you're all together, even though you're cleaning boots and cleaning toilets and dressing rooms. It's absolutely. I mean, for me, it's grounding as a footballer because you're watching the pros, and they're in at 9:30 and they train and they finish at 12, as you're in at 8:30 and you finish at 5, 6 o'clock because you're doing the jobs, etc. And so you've got something to aim at, and I think that's what it was for me. In the case, you always had that goal that you wanted to become professional. So then you're not doing the jobs, and you've kind of learnt. You've earned your spurs, I suppose, as you like. But I was lucky enough, as I said, that I didn't actually get really cut or dropped or left or had to leave till 2001. So I had a decent run.
So what are you learning at the time? Are you getting better as a player? Are you becoming more intelligent as a footballer?
You're getting fitter. You're growing. You're learning what it's like to train every day and to focus that it's not of an evening 3 or 4 times a week. This is every day. This is your career. I had Nobby Stiles as a youth team coach back then, and he was fantastic. But I think back then there was probably less technical work done than there is now. It was more getting you ready literally to play. So you would learn more, you would do more kind of formation and positional work than actual technical work. I'm sure Jason will understand what I mean, because you didn't do skills and you didn't do tricks and you didn't do, you basically did, this is how we play. You get the ball, you worked on your touch and you worked on your passing, which are the 2 most important things really that you should do first anyway. But it was all really to play in the first team. It wasn't necessarily set to make you a better player per se, but it was to make you be able to play in the first team. And I think that's where it's changed now.
Jason, what would you say about that? Is there a certain amount of sort of learning by numbers? I know. Say under more recent times, under Tony Pulis, it was when we get the ball here, you run there, and that's the end of it. if you get the ball, you pass it to X. Well, what about if Y's free? No, you just pass it to X. Don't think, right? Just pass it there. Now, is there more of that as you get more serious into the game?
I think every manager will be different. So you mentioned Tony Pulis. I think he wouldn't be too dissimilar to Gary Megson or even Sam Allardyce, who I played with, which is very rigid. Exactly what you said there. You get the ball, you have 2 or 3 options. Everyone knows where they need to be. And more often than not, you're going to try to put the ball in a position that's going to make it uncomfortable for the opposition and try and win the ball back high. So when everybody knows that and you commit to that, it's a very simple way of playing. But then I think all of those managers as well, and most managers actually, once you start to get into the final third, that's when you can come alive. That's when you can become more creative. That's when it's not so rigid. Regarding what Daryl was saying, I think what really helped me as a kid was coming out of the professional game and going into the men's game. I was playing men's football at 18 years old at Hayes. And that meant that we weren't necessarily talking about tactics. We weren't necessarily talking about pattern of play and being on nice pitches. But I learned how to compete against men at 18. And that I shot up, so there was a growth spurt. So I was more able to deal with it. But actually, it was about winning and losing, being able to operate in a dressing room. That was a key part of it as well. Being in the dressing room and being confident amongst men. And that really important sort of fork in the road between if we win or lose today in the reserves or in a development game, we can improve. Doesn't matter too much. But when you're playing and money's involved, people are paying their mortgage.
Yeah.
They're going to get moves or not, or be dropped or whatever. That intensity in the game can't be replicated. And that's I made my move to Wolves and I spent 6 months in the reserves. I really didn't think I was improving. Clearly, I was improving, but I wasn't improving in regards to what you need to participate in men's football. And I think a lot of our players miss that. They miss the juncture between here's development football and here's what it's like to win and lose every single Saturday. The pressure from the crowd, the pressure from the dressing room, the pressure from a manager who will drop you at a drop of a hat. You're not doing the business on the pitch. So that's a big fork in the road that I think a lot of our players struggle to transition. And just because you're a good development and youth team player doesn't mean you're going to be able to do it on Saturday when there's real consequences on the line. And
Daryl, so who was the manager when you got your first team game? Was it Brian Talbot? Was it?
Yeah, Brian Talbot. But just going back, just to what Jason said there, I think that for an older pro is where, for me, reserve team football is so important, because when we used to have reserve team football, you were playing against pros. You were playing against 26, 27-year-old men at 18, 17. So you had to grow up. You had to look after yourself, and I think that's what they missed out on, playing in development games and academy games. That when they're 20 and they're playing against people the same age, people the same kind of physiques. You've not got the people who have got the know-how, who have got the slide, the dark arts side of the game. Things like that. I think that really helps you grow as a player. And when you don't experience that until you make the first team, it's a real big thing for you to kind of cope with. As when you're used to playing reserve team football, I think it gives you that, as Jason said, you grow up, you're playing against men, you grow up quicker, you understand that you have to look after yourself and what you need to do to compete with these sort of people. So I think that's a really good point.
So now then, you do a lot of these academy games, you're doing a lot of stuff where it doesn't matter winning, but sooner or later, you're going to play in a competitive game, and you might not be used to it. Is that what you mean? Is that what's became?
Yeah, it's you play the reserve team football. Example, we used to play in the Pontins Central League, and you're playing against like your Man Cities, your Oldhams, your Stokes, and in them days it was they played who wasn't in the first team on the Saturday generally played on the Wednesday night in the reserves. So it was a real competitive league. It was rare that you played against, say, a Newcastle and it was a load of kids. You'd have the likes of Ian Bogan playing, proper players. And I think it sets you you know what to expect then when you make the first team. I think when you make the first team now, you hear about it and you see it, but when you're not really experiencing it in a match, as Jason said, in a match tempo, it's different to a training game. Match tempo, crowd, experienced pros. You really need to grow up and adapt really, really quickly.
So what was your first game? Well, let me ask you first, Jason. What was your first game in front of a proper crowd, a competitive game in front of thousands of people? When would that have been? Would that have been with Reading?
No, actually, my first professional game was different. I went on loan to Torquay, but actually, I would say my first, let's say, senior men's game when it felt like it meant a lot was playing for Hayes. I was 18 years old, and it was actually against. Very soon into that was a game against Slough, which was managed by Brian McDermott, funnily enough.
Wow.
And scored a hat-trick, and Brian tried to sign me from our then manager at Hayes, Terry Brown, and Terry, obviously wouldn't let me go. I came in maybe with 7 games to play at the end of the season. We had got promotion to the conference as it was at the time, so it was a really good level, and I was playing with men, experienced players who had just dropped out of the league game. I was playing with bricklayers who'd always played non-football as a way to supplement their income. So these were a bunch of men, and I was 18 years old and coming in and making a big impact. Actually, a big change in my mentality was the end of that season. Having had a successful 5 or 6 games, I scored some goals. I went away in that pre-season, and everyone went away on holiday. Everyone enjoyed themselves, but I stayed in London. I worked incredibly hard. I think I was probably the fittest I've been. And I came back the next season, the first pre-season into it, and I scored a hat-trick against Brentford. And they tried to sign me at half-time because I was 19 and I was raw, and I was just, I didn't have much finesse about my game. I hadn't been coached yet, but I knew the quickest way to goal. And they could see that there was some refinement that needed to be done. So I don't think there's a best case scenario. It was purely for me, first of all, getting the mentality to play in a men's dressing room, then knowing that I could score goals. And with those 2 elements, we had 2 bids, bid from Wolves for £250,000 and a bid from Sunderland. And I was at 19, I was going to be the most expensive non-league player in history at the time. So I went onto a Championship Manager, which I used to play at the time, which was how I built up all of my knowledge in football. And I looked at Sunderland's squad, and they had Kevin Phillips and Niall Quinn. And I looked at the map, I saw where they were. Then I looked at Wolves, and I thought, yeah, Wolves is looking good. Encouraged me to go to Wolves as well. He was my agent, so we done the deal. And I was earning. My first contract at Hayes was £15 a week, £40 for an appearance. After the first 6 games, going to the next season, I signed a year extension, £80 a week with £100 appearance. And I went to Wolves and I got a signing on fee, tens of thousands of pounds. I was on, I think I was close to £1,000 a week at the time. And I mean, it just blew my mind. I've never had that kind of money. I've never even seen that or heard that amount of money before. So that was a transition as well. How do you deal with that, living somewhere else, living by yourself and trying to remain focused on your football? And it took me about 6 months to get used to it. And I think that's something that's underrated in that it's really difficult for anyone, a teenager, to deal with the change in circumstance. And now I'm a professional footballer. So it was a transition. Wolves was a good move for me. It just didn't work out. Mark McGee had a lot of strikers. And it wasn't right. Don Goodman, Steve Bull was there. They had a lot of good players, and it was too many with me being there.
So what was your first game? Your first game in front of lots of people then, for the Albion, Daryl?
My debut was Port Vale. Port Vale, it was like the 3rd or 4th game of the season, and Darren Rogers would have been in front of me at that time, but unluckily for him, luckily for me, he got chicken pox. So I found out the Friday that I was playing, and so I didn't really have time to kind of worry about it or be nervous or whatever. It was just the fact that, right, you're playing, and that's it. And I played it right back, and it was you know what? You look back and it's such a great time. It's what your whole, your goals in life was for that moment. That is what you wanted. You wanted, to play in front of a crowd, a professional footballer. And I mean, we got beat, and it turned a little bit sour. But it was great. It was great to be to look at the Sport Argus on the Saturday night and see your name in it.
So, who remind us who was in that team then?
It was Brian Talbot was the manager then. In fact, he was player manager at that time. Bernard McNally was playing then. Chrissy White, Stacey North, Darren Bradley, Don Goodman, Gary Robson, Colin Anderson. So it was it was the team obviously that I'd watched play as an apprentice, and obviously I knew them, but we hadn't actually trained that much with them. They knew who I was because obviously I'd signed pro, but really I wasn't in the first team squad as much for the start of that season until literally the Friday before my first game.
Do you remember Stacey North's throw-ins?
Yeah, I do.
Like these long throw-ins, but they were like any other throw-in. They didn't loop. They just went like an arrow about 8 feet above the ground. They were better than a corner.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know much else about him, but I remember his throw-ins, Daryl. They were lethal.
Yeah, he was. I mean, Stacey was. He'd go in the weights room every day, and he'd just do thousands of light weights. He had done massive weights, so he wasn't big, but he was just really, really strong because he'd done light weights and loads of reps. Done it every day, and then he'd throw this ball. It was like a missile, and he'd throw it from almost a corner flag, and it was almost like he's setting up for a corner.
Yeah.
It was it was a good, something good to have in your arsenal,
Jason, so who was the first defender you came up against? Real quality defender, and you thought, aye. I mean, you've been, and no disrespect to Slough, but you've been running rings round whoever was playing fullback for Slough, and then all of a sudden you were in the big league. Now, who was the first one you thought, hang on, I'm not going to have everything my own way here?
I remember the moment. I think you could say that to most players, and it's that moment when you realize that you're going to have to improve, and that can happen in several different ways. For me, the first thing was training with professional players, because I was training like Daryl said, I was training on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then playing on Saturdays. So first of all, the pace of training just absolutely left me. Sort of took away a lot of confidence from me for the first 3 or 4 weeks. I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to compete with the likes of Robbie Keane and Don Goodman and Dominic Foley. And at Wolves, I thought to myself, this is going to be a problem for me. But we had a reserve game, I remember, against Blackburn, and Marlon Brooms, who at the time was a star coming up. He was England captain at youth levels. And I remember not being able to run away from him. I wasn't stronger than him, and my movement wasn't my strong point anyway. And I thought to myself, I literally had no answer to what he brought to the table. And as a striker, the worst thing is this: he was happy to mark me 1v1. That's the first time that had ever happened to me. Because I was fast, most people gave me 5 or 10 yards or made sure they had a defender to cover. He was marking me 1v1 on the halfway line, comfortable. And that was the moment when I realized that I had to change. I had to make sure that my game was a lot tighter. I needed to make sure my movement was better. And those are the things that, strangely enough, I would say in my career, is only 2 or 3 times with 2 or 3 coaches, I felt like I was really being coached. Like I was really improving as a striker. My game improved by playing a lot, by professional training, but actually as a striker saying, in this position, do that. In that position, make sure you do this. In this position, do that. And you'd be amazed, considering a majority of my career, I was the record transfer going into the club. And the mentality is, well, you're the record transfer, you know what to do. I didn't. I just happened to have the knack of scoring goals. But actually rounding off my game and becoming better, it didn't happen that I actually came across a coach who could improve me and work with me as a striker.
And Daryl, what about you? What was your first... who was the first striker who ran rings round you? Not that they ever did, I'm sure, but I mean, who came close to it then?
I remember, especially when I was playing my first season, I was playing more as a right back, and I remember Rick Holden, who used to be at Manchester City, was at Oldham, left winger, probably about 6'2". He was strong. He was stronger than me, as Jason said. He was powerful, but he never beat me as in ran away from me. But he'd just get half a yard and he'd just whip this ball in. And if I went tight, he'd get away from me. If I dropped off, he'd run at me. And I used to, you know, when you're in that game, Jace, and you're there and you're thinking, you end up in two minds then, because you're thinking, I don't know what to do, because if I go tight, he's going to nip it and whip it round me. If I drop off, he'll cross it before I get to him. And, you know, you've got all these dilemmas going on in your mind, as well as trying to concentrate on what's happening. And it kind of puts you on the back foot. And then once you're on the back foot, you get nowhere near them. And it comes down to experience. Then the more you play, the kind of more you understand what, you know, the way certain players play, and you adapt your game accordingly. And sometimes you'll adapt it and you'll go tight on someone, because you know that if you get tight on them, and again, with the training, as you get stronger, you become more confident and your game improves. So yeah, I always remember Rick Holden. He was, for me, he was all real handful. Real handful.
At that time, let me both ask you this. It always fascinates me. Who is there a player you can think of who you thought, this guy is going to win the World Cup? You know, he's going to be brilliant. Who just for whatever reason didn't quite get there? Can you remember anybody? Or perhaps there were loads who were just exceptional, that faded for some reason. Jason?
I would say, I'm going to give some anecdotal evidence on this one, because I think what happens, and Daryl, you would have seen this, you'll get a kid come up from the youth team and will be absolutely brilliant in training. I mean, fantastic. Never seen anything like it. You play a reserve game and they'll be shocking. I mean, like, to Daryl's point, they don't understand the game. And then the problem is, are they going to get 10 games to learn? Are they going to be able to be adopted into the team whilst they make those mistakes? I think more often than not, it's a no. And I think we lose a lot of talent from that perspective. But I'll say one thing about a player who surprised me. When I was at Blackburn, we brought up 2 or 3 youngsters. We had a good conveyor belt of talent there. And they brought up this young kid who was playing midfield. And they put him at centre half. And for the first 2 weeks, I absolutely tore him apart. I mean, to the point I started to go on the other side because it was embarrassing. I didn't want to get his confidence on the floor. I was really training very well at that time. I was confident, and you know, I was in my late 20s, going to 30s. So I knew all of the dark arts that Daryl spoke about there. Then we had a game coming up against Chelsea, and Sam Allardyce says, "We're gonna put Jonesy in," and I thought, Jonesy against Drogba. And I remember pulling a few of the boys going, "Oh, this is gonna be difficult for us," because I mean, Drogba and Jonesy, you know, I'm not sure about him. Who's playing midfield? He's coming to defense. He's done okay. I have never seen, to this day, I have never seen a debut like that before in my life. Somehow overnight, he got quicker, he got stronger, he got more intelligent. Drogba didn't get a kick. Every single game I played against Chelsea, Drogba destroyed our back four. And I'm talking about Chris Samba, Ryan Nelson, Brett, I mean, top players. Jonesy didn't give him a kick. He ran with him, he beat him in the air. He was intelligent. When he got the ball, he was launching attacks. So that was the opposite. Someone who I thought in training, I'm not sure about him, but come the game, he improved and got better and was more mature. You could literally the next day, you could see his chest puffing out. And he was, I mean, I know that he's had injuries, but ability-wise, he's one of the most talented players I've seen. But the way he improved, I've never seen anything like that before.
It's just weird. Daryl, can you think of a similar one?
So I'm just in the middle of a massive storm at the moment, so I apologise if you hear crashes and rain and everything. It's a bit crazy. As Jason said, I've seen players in training who have been out of this world, who they've got all the tricks and they've got the skill and the sharp and they go around people. But come to match day, it just doesn't happen. You don't see it, and I don't know if it's I don't know if it's a confidence thing or what, but I've seen them, and you're like, they are, what a player. And then all of a sudden, match day just doesn't happen. It's really strange. But as I mentioned before, I mentioned a guy called Ian Bogan. Ian Bogan was at Newcastle. I think he went to Port Vale and things like that. He was a midfielder. And this guy, he was very much in like a Gaza ilk. He was around at the same time. And you just thought, you watched his ability and you thought he's going to be a top player. And it never really, I don't know for what reason why, it never really happened for him. He wasn't the quickest. He was a bit Gaza-like with the weight situation and the shape. But he could pass the ball and he could go past somebody. He had no pace. But what he could do with the ball was absolutely fantastic. But he never went where you expect them to go. And as Jason said, you'll see other ones who you think they've got no chance, and they go on and have a fantastic career. And whether it's how they develop as they get older, how their confidence evolves, I don't know. But you see it go both ways. So it just happens.
Adrian, on that as well. Sorry, I just want to mention someone and it's not that he didn't fulfill his potential. Sometimes lots of things can happen. The right manager at the right time, someone believing in you at the right time, I think is a big part of it. Form, of course, is important. There's always that element. I think I mentioned it in our last talk, in that if you start well, then you're always a good player, even if you go through a bad time. But if you start bad, then you're always a bad player, even if you score a couple of goals somewhat in the time that you're there. But I thought was fantastic at West Bromwich Albion was called Justin Richards.
Right.
He played up front during the time when I was there, and he had great movement. He was quick. He could score goals. He was powerful. I actually recommended him to Ian Holloway, and he ended up going to Bristol Rovers. Again, it didn't work out for him. I know he had a career in the league and also non-league as well. But that was someone whose talent was off the scale. But to Daryl's point, it happens more often than you would expect, that you see people who have the required ability, but for a variety of reasons around confidence, around opportunity, around the right manager at the right time, it just doesn't happen for them. But he was someone who had extreme ability.
You mentioned pace there, so Ian Bogan didn't have much of it. Who was the best player you played against who had no pace at all? Or let me put it another way, who was the slowest player you played with who was still good? I mean, Darren Bradley springs to mind. He couldn't really run, could he? But he just...
He had no knees, that's why.
Brilliantly.
He struggled with, that was down to his knees. He always had sore knees, Darren, but he could pass the ball and he could play Bradders. But I'm trying to think off the top of my head who...
Enzo Maresca. He couldn't run. Great player, but
if he'd have had an extra yard or two, he'd have been an absolute world beater. Enzo, he had that much ability, but he never quite had that extra yard to get away from people. But he had a fantastic career with the ability he had. He was a player.
You're talking about pace. He was on with us last week, and I hope you wouldn't mind me saying it. Darren Moore, once he got going, was quick, but it's get going. Like once he's got the first 2 or 3. I'm going to deny this if you tell him I said this, but once he got the first 2 or 3 strides, he wasn't the quickest over the first 2 or 3 strides. But once he got into running, he was quick. But if you kept it in and around it, he wasn't the quickest, let's say.
Okay, that's interesting because that's the opposite of that old maxim about somebody being quick over a yard. You know what I mean? He was the opposite.
No, but that's a real thing. I mean, look, Darren, you tell you, so once he got his feet sorted out and once he was in a direction and he had and he had space to run, he was quick.
You sort of pulled him.
But in tight spaces, I mean, I wasn't the quickest in tight spaces. I would say I wasn't too dissimilar. I was quick once I got to open my legs out. But I wasn't necessarily the quickest in small situations.
I think some people you say it's quick, are sharp. So as you said, over 2-3 yards, they're sharp. They can nick in and out and away from you. But if it comes into a straight sprint, you can catch them and go past them. But for that kind of, whether it's the centre of gravity that and they can get in and out quickly. So they're kind of sharp, but over, say, a 20-yard run, you'll probably, you'll catch them up. But over a 2-yard kind of to the ball and out, they'll probably beat you. So that's the difference, I think.
Somebody just messaged that you played against Real Madrid in California in a friendly. Have they been drinking? Have they been doing too much lockdown drinking, or did that?
No, that was a real thing. Hey, that was, yeah. We that was the end of my first season with Brian Talbot. We got invited. Well, I don't know how, but we got invited to play in this tournament in LA, and it was ourselves, Real Madrid, Vasco da Gama from Brazil, and Cologne. And these, right, and we were in, as it was then, Division 2, and obviously they were all at the top of their respective divisions. And I think John Tashak was the manager of Madrid at the time. And I remember we had, I don't know how we wangled it, but we were there, and we got club suits to go and everything. I was like, this is fantastic. So there was a dinner before the start of the tournament, and they the presidents of the I think it was San Antonio Football Association or something. So he done a speech, and he said, Vasco da Gama, champions of Brazil, and blah 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 blah, and Real Madrid, champions of Europe, and champion of the league, and blah 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 blah, and Cologne, blah blah, and West Bromwich Albion, an up and coming side. So you're like, yeah, okay. So our first game was against Madrid in downtown Mexico, and Hugo Sanchez played for Madrid, so it was, you can imagine, it was full of Mexicans. And Brian Talbot goes to me just before the game. He says, "Right, go man for man on Sanchez. If he doesn't get a kick, you've done really well." I thought, okay then. So anyway, we kick off. I can honestly say I only seen the back of his shirt about twice. He just, his movement, and he wasn't really trying. It was just incredible. So he scored a hat-trick. They took him off after about an hour, and the stadium just emptied because all the Mexicans went home because they'd only come to see him. So it was, I mean, experience fantastic. But to be on the same pitch, even at half pace of somebody of that quality, it was something to remember.
Someone's just reminded us about Kevin Bartlett. Do you remember him?
Yeah, flying machine, Kev.
In about 7 seconds or something. He was the quickest player I'd ever.
Kev was great. Kev was great. He had to kick the ball. That was the only problem. He was so good. I remember we used to have kind of skill games and things. When you go, Jace, in and out the cones with the ball.
Yeah.
Chip it back to the next man. He catches it and goes. It would take him 10, 15 attempts to chip it back. But if you put in a ball over the top, that was it. You never got near him. And more often than not, he'd score. But he was an absolute. He could catch pigeons, Kev. He was flying.
Mm. So, Jason, when you came to the Albion, who was doing the donkey work in midfield then? Who was was it Michael Appleton then? Had he joined us at that point? I mean, he was a warrior, wasn't he?
He was. Appy came after. We also had, of course, Derek McInnes.
Yeah,
who was a big influence for us. Jordan as well, greatly underrated, great quality on the ball. But I really think Derek was kind of the personality of the team. Anyways, he was very dependable. Always knew he was going to retain the ball, and was a leader. You could see, no surprise to me that he went into coaching and management, because he was thinking about the game on that level at that time. Of course, we had the Chambers twins as well, and you talk about donkey work. I remember one game when against Portsmouth, if you remember this, Daryl, and James Chambers, I'm sure it was James. James was told to man mark Prozanetsky.
That's right, yeah.
To man mark Prozanetsky. And Portsmouth, I know he won that game comfortably, but Prozanetsky, I mean, what a talent. And as soon as he realized that Chamber was man marking him, I remember in the first half, he started running around in circles doing this.
Yeah.
And he was literally running around in circles, and Chamber, the Chambers are the nicest young men possibly imagined to me. And, you know, Chambo being totally keyed up and being honest was literally following him around in circles, marking him. And I remember we were at half time and the manager, that's disrespectful what he's doing. You're doing a good job, keep doing it. And he did it. And to be fair to him, Prosinecki didn't get a kick. But you talk about talent, he was incredible. He spent the whole game rolling the ball over the top of his foot. Like he just had incredible ability. But again, we came up with a game plan to silence him, and we done it. And Chambo had to take the bullet that time, and we teased him about that for years. And we go, "Yeah, Chambo." But he did the job, man. And I know they went on, had great careers. They're really nice. They're really human beings, great people.
So, Daryl, not long after you've been playing against Hugo Sanchez, presumably you were in the side at Twerton Park when we went down to the 3rd division.
No, I wasn't. Well, no, I'd played the week before. We played Newcastle the week before at home.
It was our endless drawing streak.
And we drew 1-1. And I was marking Mickey Quinn, and we'd had a clash, and his shoulder got under my armpit, and I ended up not dislocating my shoulder, but I twisted my shoulder, so I couldn't train all week. And I said to Goldie on match day, he said, "Are you all right?" I said, "Yeah, listen, I'm fine, I'll play." He said, "Okay then." And by the time we got to the ground, he completely changed his mind. So I wasn't included. So I was sat at Twerton Park then, James, I'm sure you can remember. You only had about 3 or 4 seats in the dugout, and you just had like a school's bench at the side of it, and we were all sat in our suits on this school bench watching the game unfold, and obviously it didn't go the way we wanted it to, and we ended up going down.
Yeah. There's an absolute biblical storm happening behind you.
Yeah, it is. It's still going.
I was just thinking about Daryl talking about sitting down wearing a suit. I have to tell you, you can't tell it from this call. Daryl's one of the coolest men you will ever come across. Everything about him is cool. So when I came to West Bromwich Albion, I remember, I'll never forget it. He had my dream car. He had a 7 Series BMW. It was you remember it?
No, it wasn't 8 Series.
8 Series, excuse me. It was the 8
Series.
Series. That's the one. The 8 Series. And I remember I was in love with this car. And he used to do some DJing as well. He always used to come in looking $1 million like he does now. And I always thought that he was really cool. So I would never have told you that when we were playing. But it's good that I can admit that now. You have my dream car. You were able to DJ, and even now you got a silver fox in your hair, and I can't.
Mate, you're making me blush. But just don't forget, I had to room with Jason once, and an away game, and he goes to me, "Listen, can you shake my head?" I says, "What?" he says, "My head needs to be shaved. Can you do the back and check?" I was like, "All right, and if you want me." I mean, I was about 30 at the time. I've never done it before in my life. And he was going, "No, you missed this bit here, see this bit here, put it on." I was like, so it gave me new experiences, Jace, because I've never done it before.
I was worried when you started that story where that was going to go.
Yeah. Anyway, that's enough of the bromance. We'll the late night X-rated version. So, Daryl, we mentioned Twerton Park, so we have to nullify that by talking about promotion. What do you remember of Ozzy? And actually, Ozzy told me, World Cup winner, I think I've told you before, that I met him when he was managing Dinamo Zagreb, and he said to me, "Oh, Daryl was one of the better players I ever worked with." So,
I wasn't aware of that.
And we were drunk in a bar in Budapest.
Oh, that's why now the truth's coming out.
In all sincerity, he did mention you. But anyway, so what was it like playing under him then?
It was great. I mean, it was disappointing for me that the fact when he joined the club, I'd missed about the last 6 games of the season previously, and we thought I'd just twinged a muscle in my back and whatever. And it turned out that I'd fractured a joint. So I was literally trying to train, and so I'd train with the lads for a few days, and then it'd flare up again. So I'd have to drop out. But the atmosphere around the club was fantastic. I remember his first day. We had a fitness coach, and the first day we'd done some hill work with the fitness coach. The next day, no fitness coach. So we've gone, "Where's Frank, Gaff?" He went, "There's no hills on a football pitch." I sacked him. Got rid of him. Well, that was Ozzy. But honestly, it was the training, everything. he loved the circle. We used to keep ball for probably a minimum of an hour every morning before you began to train, because he loved keeping the ball and playing, and he was laughing. And Keith Birkinshaw was like a serious one, and he was the one always trying to calm him down and say, "Come on, Ozzy, we've got to do some work now." And he just said, "That's all right, Keith, don't worry. Come on, play." And he just loved it. But it was such a good time at the club. I mean, he turned the club around, because obviously Bobby got sacked before he came, because we didn't get promotion, and obviously the club was, it was in the doldrums, and he came around, and obviously his name alone picked everyone up. I mean, it's Ozzy. We watched him, in the FA Cup finals for Spurs, and you watched him in the World Cup, and he's coming, he's there, and he was such a nice guy, and the way we played, it was just a joy. It was an absolute. I mean, as a defender, there was literally, when I broke into the team towards the back end of the season, there was myself and Gary Strodder and Bradders in front of us, and then everybody else attacked. Fullbacks went, midfielders went. That was it. There was just us three, and it was. But in that division, we were able to do that because we had the quality most of the time to deal with it. But obviously, as you go up, he would have had to adapt it a bit more, obviously, because the quality of the players you're playing against are better. But it was absolutely fantastic.
So I'm trying to ask, because I know you didn't get on with Gary, Jason, but by the time you came to us, what was your game all about? Did you learn anything from being with us, football-wise?
I think you learn the most from playing the game. So I can't say I learned much. There wasn't much individual training or focus on strikers, but you couldn't help but improve being with Bob Taylor, seeing his movement. When we were doing shooting practices, you look at his movement, the way he engaged with defenders, the way he used space. Lee Hughes was just so instinctive. It was hard to learn much from him, because it was like everything just came to him. Like he was practicing these things. The one thing I got from him, which didn't suit my game, was that he was prepared to shoot from any angle, any time in the game. There was no point where he was like, maybe I should hold it up here. If there was a chance to get a shot away, he would just get it. I think what I learned from being there under Nixon was, he was very demanding, and there was no grey area. So there was no excuses. You couldn't use anything as an excuse. And sometimes I feel like he would set us challenges for us to overcome. And in many cases, it felt like it was the dressing room against him. But gave us motivation. I remember a game away at Bolton, and it was freezing. It was snowing. And the morning of the game, he got us down to a park, and we were running. It wasn't like a warm-up. It wasn't tactics. It was running. Sweat on, people on their haunches at the end of the runs, up hills. And you're thinking, there's a match on today. I don't know what he saw. I don't know if he felt that we weren't up for it. I don't know if he felt that we needed something to overcome. But we went into that game and we ran them off the pitch. I scored the winner in that game, actually. And again, it was just like that unrelenting... Relenting is a good word. We just knew that there wasn't any excuses. There was no black and white. And I remember some of his team talks were really inspiring as well. I remember he'd say to us, there was one particular one where he was speaking about Roy Keane. He was saying, "So Roy Keane, is he faster than you lot? No. Can he do a drag back more than you? Is there any skills he can do more than you? No. So why is he running the pitch then? Why does he run you all over the pitch?" And he was right in that what he could do wasn't over and above our station, but he was prepared to work harder and do more. And he required us to do that. And once you are able to work harder than your opposition, then the quality will come. So that part of it, you absolutely got from him. The other side was, sometimes you felt like playing for him was like playing for someone who was playing PlayStation. You must have heard him on the sidelines. Go left, go right, drop, sprint. I mean, it was so intense all the time. So I think you lose players very quickly. You can fall out of him very quickly, as I did several times. But yeah, he required us to give everything, and we did.
So is there any manager you'd like to talk about, Daryl? I'm trying to think, you got Alan Buckley?
I've got about 13, Adrian, so just pick one, I'll tell you.
Who did you? I don't know. Like, dislike? You pick. You tell us what.
I didn't get on well with Dennis Smith. Dennis, he came to the club. I wasn't big enough for him. He liked defenders to be 6'2", 6'3". The likes of Matt Carbon, Sean Murphy, that sort of stature. So he wouldn't. I remember he joined around about Christmas time, just before Boxing Day or something. I think he joined, and I played a few games, and then I was literally in and out. And then the next season, I literally just played reserve games. He took me to the first few games, and then I wasn't involved for probably 3 or 4 months at all. I didn't even train with the first team sometimes, and sometimes I did. But then by the end of the season, he'd made me captain. So it was a really and I'd done nothing different at the start of the season than I did at the end of the season. But I got to the point on that where, and I'm kind of, Jason will let you know, I'm quite placid. I don't, I'm not one of these ranters and ravers, managers and all that. If they pick me, they pick me. If they don't, I start to look at myself rather than them. And I just got to the point, and he said something in a meeting on the training pitch, and I thought, that's me done. And I went up with him. I said, listen, I think I want to away. I'm done. And I'd actually had a phone call and spoke to Burnley a few days before that when Stan Turner was there, and he said, "Do you fancy it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I do. Yeah, I felt at that time I needed to a new challenge. I needed to be wanted, if you like." That's what he said. That's what he said on the training pitch. He said something, and then he pointed at me and said, "He thinks he's out of the picture, but he's not." And I was like, "I haven't been in the picture for 5 months, so why has it changed all of a sudden?" And I said, "I've had enough." And then the Burnley thing didn't happen, and then within a week or two, he put me back in the side, and before the end of the season, he made me captain. So it was a really, really strange. It made no sense, but he struggled because he's not a very good coach. He needed Malcolm Crosby, and he didn't have him for about the first month or so because I think Crosby was still at Sunderland at that time, and he couldn't. I think due to his contract, he couldn't leave before a certain amount of time. So when he came in, the training improved a bit. But I struggled with Dennis. I'll speak to him now, but we didn't get on. I didn't really get on with Gary either. I just remember that when he took over, we used to play murder ball. Do you remember that, Jace, on the Hawthorns? Murder ball every morning. Self-indulgent footballers was the shout all the time, coming off the sideline. And it was. But as Jason said with Gary, it was very, very intense all of the time. But that's how he was. But he had his favourites. He had the ones who he looked after more than the ones who he wasn't too au fait with, But that's how managers are.
Can I make a point of what Daryl said there? And I think it was the thing that really made it difficult for me at West Brom is that it felt personal. And I think to Daryl's point, I've been dropped by several managers. Some have sold me, some have kept me, some have dropped me, whatever it may be. But when it becomes personal is when you go across the point of no return, where it becomes about you. And I think most managers can understand that, there is a time where the relationship's going to be frayed, because believe me, as a manager, the only people happy in that building are the 11 starting. Outside of that, nobody's happening. And in many cases, you can tell a good squad by the happiness of those who are not playing. And what we had was 11 who were really happy, and the rest of them would feel like it was personal. And again, look, I think if I was a manager, I would hinge my actions on the results. And there's no doubt that Gary Megson got results. But I think the high turnover of players was because it was such a personal experience. When you fell out with him, there was literally no coming back. After we fell out, there was nowhere I could have ever played for him again. And I think a lot of people got themselves in that situation. Fair to say, Daryl?
I remember, you may not know this, Jazz. I remember we played a reserve game. You were playing, I was playing, played at the Hawthorns. And after the game, we were all off the next day. And then remember the fitness coach Was it AD? Remember?
AD, yeah.
He came up to you and said, Robbo, you're in tomorrow. You're running tomorrow. You're in at 10 o'clock. And I went to you, I said, Jace, that's an absolute joke. That's an absolute joke. We were off on the, whether it would be the Wednesday. We was in on the Thursday. On the Thursday, we're warming up. Gary calls me over and he says, you know, if you're in on time every day and somebody's late every day and they get away with it, what would you think? And I went, I don't get your point. It wouldn't. I'll be like, whatever. I'm not bothered. He said, but if they're always late and they get away with it, and you're always on time, what would you think? I said, well, I think they're taking the mick a bit, really. He said, exactly. He says, everybody's body fat's down. Jason's is up. That's why he was running on Thursday. I went, okay. I thought you didn't have to say that. You didn't have to tell me, but he wanted to know that he knew that I'd said that. Right? It's just, so that's. Managers are different, some, I remember being dropped by Brian Little and he literally apologised for dropping me. I played 2 games because Laris Sigurdsson was injured and then he brought back Laris and he said, listen, I'm leaving you out. I said, that's fine, Gaffer, I understand, blah, blah, blah. He said, yeah, but it's not right, is it? I'm like, you're the manager, So managers are different, aren't
they? Yeah.
So Ian Tinsley's just asked, did Mego ever put his arm around anyone?
The only ones that I've seen, the only ones that I really seen him close to were like Foxy, Raw Fox, Jordan, Derek McInnes. They were the ones he was really kind of, fond of. They were the ones that he listened to.
He was struggling. I said to him once, because I sit right behind the bench at the Albion, and I'd seen him yell at players from about 5 meters away. And you could see he was breaking them. And I said, well, what good does that do? And he said, well, if their heads drop, I know everything I need to know about them, they're no good to me.
Yeah,
that's about right.
Yeah, I think that was definitely his tactic. And it was, if I lose 3 or 4 of them, then that's okay. And, I understand it. This is, there's real consequences to the performances and to what we went on to achieve. And I don't think that any of us are going to sit here and say, because of the way it was done, it was wrong. It was, we got to where we got to. So I'm certainly not here to criticize. It was only just to say that it wasn't a nice environment to be in. It wasn't something you woke up and said, oh, I can't wait to get into training today. Can't wait for, for the next training session. Nevertheless, nothing is better than winning. And we won a lot. So, it was a difficult place to be. But like I said, to Daryl's point, when it felt like it was personal, when it felt like other people were given the opportunity to got away with things that certain other people wouldn't, that's when it became a problem.
What would you say about Nathan Ellington? He seems a bit of an enigma to us. So he's a bit like Jason Kumas or something. What went on there?
Just incredible ability. We went to the same school, funnily enough, and we were together at Bristol Rovers. Then subsequently, we ended up at Wigan together. So, he's like a brother to me, even to this day. Left foot, right foot, pace, great in the air. I call Nathan the kid because he has this kid-like enthusiasm about him. He's just a really nice kid. And I think the challenge for him was leaving Wigan, which I don't think he necessarily wanted to leave in the first place. I think it was a move that had to happen because he wasn't getting the right contract offered at Wigan. He was leaving myself in a dressing room where he was very comfortable, going into a dressing room like West Brom where there was big personalities, a lot of strikers, huge expectation. I believe he was the record signing.
Yeah.
And I don't think he took to that. And I think it was a tough time for him, but ability-wise, as good as anything I've ever played with, the nicest person you could ever imagine to be around. But I think the pressure and the situation, you remember I said to you about the right manager at the right club at the right time. Yeah. I think it just wasn't that for him. But, what a talent, what someone who has great ability, but unfortunately didn't work out.
I mean, 2 questions for both of you. How would you fancy playing under Slaven Bilic? And also, what would your thoughts be ahead of this mad period we're going into now, playing behind closed doors? Would you relish that, or you think it was a bit odd, Daryl, or what?
The problem is playing behind the closed doors is it's almost like a practice game. You know, you see the stadiums now, and they're playing either a friendly game, and that's what I think it's easy to get yourself up when there's a crowd there, Jace. Do you agree?
Definitely.
You know, if there's a crowd there, and whether it's for you or against you, you walk out and you hear that cacophony of noise, and it's fancy. You know, it gets, you know, it gives you goosebumps, and you think, yeah, I can't wait. When you're coming out to an empty stadium, it's, you know, you've got to get yourself up. You've got to get that extra 5-10% yourself. So I think that's going to be strange. You know, and it's coming down to a 9-game season now as well, isn't it? So it's not even like you've got 42 games, 46 games. You've literally got a 9-game season, and you've got to start right at the top of the tree. You know, you've got to be set to go. It's going to be very, very interesting, I think.
I always found, Adrian, in the championship, that it was about momentum, because there's so many games. The games come so thick and fast. Is that once you're on a good run, you can really keep it up because you're not training. There's just games coming, game after game after game. So it's going to be. I think we'll know a lot more. I mean, it sounds like a ridiculous statement, but you know a lot more after the first game, the first 1 or 2 games, because you're going to see those teams that are having the momentum versus the ones that don't. And that's not necessarily about the results per se. It's going to be about the performances. And I think the one thing with Slaven is that, you know, he has them playing an attacking brand of football. And I think that is going to be a positive for them. I'd be more concerned if they were defensive minded. I think the fact that they're strong in regards to their attacking play and the way they open up the pitch, I think that is going to benefit to them, because to Daryl's point, it's hard to, sometimes you feel the scenario of the game from the crowd. Sometimes the crowd tell you what game it is, what period of the game. Sometimes it's what you do. And I think that this will more than most play into West Bromwich Albion at the moment, play to their strengths.
And I think to play for Slab the way they play, defensively, the way we play offensively helps our defenders in massively. I think if we didn't play that way, I'm not sure if defensively we'd actually be strong enough to kind of to compete and to win games. I think the fact that we're so offensive really helps our defence. You know, and so far this season, I think majority of the time it's been absolutely fantastic to watch them. I really do. I think it's the best football we've seen down there for a long time.
Right. So look, as somebody just said, we win the first 3. I think we're up. So that'd be nice, wouldn't it? We can go back to being locked down. All right. Listen, we'll leave it there. Really, really great talking to you again, Jason. Daryl, always a pleasure.
Thanks, Adrian.
You don't see what you're wearing now, since you've been told you're so well dressed. And there's poor Jason over there. He's got the same shirt 3 times. He still hasn't learned a lesson from you.
Listen, there's Armani tags in that. You don't worry about that.
All right, listen, thanks to you too. Thanks for watching. Do give generously to the Jason Roberts Foundation. They do some incredible work there, particularly important at the moment. We talk about social exclusion and everything, and also London Baggies. Max Davis, what a legend! What a legend he is. So thanks very much for doing all that, putting it together. We'll do it again soon. All the best, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Absolute pleasure.
See ya.